Hello everyone, it is Erin, and today I'm here to talk about composting. And this is such a topic that is near and dear to my heart because I am an environmental scientist. I have a master's degree in environmental science, and this is such a big part of why I love the environment is because we can naturally recycle things. So I wanted to share these types of spreads with you today because I think it's stuff that we don't talk about enough. We talk a lot about gardening, and composting can actually really help your garden. So let's go ahead and get into all of the topics today, including what is compost? So compost is the natural process of recycling your organics. And those are things like your food scraps, leaves, coffee grinds, branches, twigs, paper, and grass clippings. So these are things that you generate waste around your house all the time. And instead of putting it in the trash, we can recycle it in a different way. Not by putting it in a recycling bin, but by creating compost. So why compost? I guess is a big thing. So not only does it help you personally, but it can also be really helpful for Mother Nature. So one, it reduces your waste stream. So there's a study that's been shown in America that food scraps and garden waste make up 28% of your household waste. So think about that. If it's not going to a landfill, then you're reducing the overall waste stream, you're reducing the overall amount of waste that is getting put into a landfill. And on top of that, when organic waste goes to a landfill, it is not an effective process. So it not only is harmful in the amount of waste that is generated to a landfill, it also is harmful because it creates biogases instead of decomposing, because it is surrounded by all sorts of household trash. And again, it's not an effective process for breaking down its own organic matter. So biogases include things like methane, and I'm sure you know about greenhouse gases and climate change, and methane is a big issue when it comes to greenhouse gases and accelerating climate change. Moving forward, we have that it improves soil health. Again, this is really good for your garden. So compost is very nutrient rich in a natural way. It's not adding nutrients with fertilizers and things like that. It is naturally nutrient rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, all of which are extremely good for your garden. Moving on, it also conserves water. Again, better for the planet, better for your dollars, because you will not be using quite as much water for your garden. So soil with organic matter has higher water retaining capacity, which means you don't need to water it as often. And then not only that, there is a way that we can look at recycling your food waste, but also preventing it. So reducing your personal food waste, meaning dollars in your pocket because you are not spending as much money on your food, by preventing that food waste. So we need to learn how to shop for, prepare for, and store food in a more effective way so we reduce the amount of overall food waste we need to compost. So there are a few benefits to composting at home. And there are a lot of different types of compost that we can do. So there are two main methods of home composting. There is a cold method, which is a more hands-off approach, and a hot composting method, which means you are working on your ratios to create an ideal situation that recycles your organics. So for a cold process, again, it is more natural. However, it does take a longer timeline. So it could take 1 to 2 years to be able to use that compost versus hot composting, which can take about 1 to 12 months. And this cold process is an anaerobic process versus the hot process, which is creating that optimum carbon nitrogen ratio. And there's a few different ways that you can do this at home. You can do it with a composting bin. Me personally, I have a tumbler bin, which looks like this, and you can rotate it over and over again. You can also do trench composting, which means you basically build a ditch and you build it low enough where it is naturally in the ground composting. Doing trench composting also allows you to do animal product if you bury it deep enough. And then you have vermicomposting, which is using worms to decompose your organic matter. And if you're not into doing it DIY style, you can also outsource it. So if you have like a little bucket in your kitchen that they sell on Amazon for, a couple bucks, you can also call your local municipality and see if food waste is collected. There's also local gardens and community gardens that have composting there, so you can also get in touch with them. Or you can do a pay for service where they pick up your organic compost. They'll give you a gallon bin that you keep in your kitchen or outside, and then they pick it up, once a month, just like they would from a trash pickup. So again, if you're not into DIYing, there is a way that you can help, especially if you're in an apartment complex, for example, and you don't really have the space to be able to do composting the way it kind of needs to get done because you don't have that outdoor space. But there are things that you can and there are things that you cannot compost. So let's start with the no column. Black walnut tree leaves. For some reason, black walnut releases a toxin, so you can't use that in your organic composting. Coal and charcoal ash, dairy products, and eggs. Eggs specifically, not the eggshells. Eggshells are okay. Diseased plants, so if it is infested with insects or it is diseased, you can spread that disease to your organics, and that is not good for your compost. Fats, grease, lards, and oils, meat, fish bones, and scraps, pet feces or litter, and then your trimmings that are treated with pesticides. Although, if you are doing local composting, some of these things may be able to be collected because they have a larger process for dealing with them versus your home compost. So let's talk about what can be composted. Cardboard that is uncoated, meaning it's not like box store type of cardboard. It is, it doesn't have any sort of laminate image on it, and broken down into small pieces. Coffee grounds, filters, and tea bags. Eggshells, fruits, and vegetables. Fireplace ashes where you are using natural wood for your fireplace. Untreated wood. Grass clippings, hair and fur, hay and straw, houseplants, leaves, newspaper that is shredded. Again, we like to have a small broken down so that way it allows oxygen. We'll talk about that in a second. Nutshells, paper, again uncoated and in small pieces. Sawdust, wood chips, and yard clippings, again not treated with pesticides. So those are some of the things that can and cannot be composted. And then let's talk about how to compost. So this is the more effective way of doing it. So we talked about that a little bit before. There's a cold process where you just shove a bunch of food scraps in. You don't care about the ratios, any of that kind of stuff. It's going to be a more wet process, meaning it doesn't allow for as much oxygen, and that's why it takes a little bit longer. So this is a hot composting method where you are trying to maintain your ideal ratios. So for your carbon to nitrogen ratio, we have 25 to 30 parts to 1. So 25 to 30 parts of carbon to 1 part nitrogen. So the nitrogen are your greens. They're your fresh grass clippings, food scraps, and coffee grounds. versus your carbon, which is your browns, that is dead leaves, branches and twigs, and papers. But not only do you need these types of scraps, you also need to allow for oxygen and water. So oxygen can be done by layering. So you want to do multiple layers of your browns to one layer of your greens, and layering allows for a natural oxygen to be able to be added. Keeping items in small pieces, that's why some of these cardboards and papers, it says do it in a shredded way, because smaller pieces allow for more oxygen between those pieces. And then turning your piles regularly. So if you have an open pile, using a pitchfork. If you have a tumbler like me, you just rotate it. So there's different ways of turning your piles, and that naturally allows oxygen to get into your process. And then if you are using water scrap, or if you are using food scraps, you are naturally adding water to your process. However, if it seems a little bit dry, you might need to add a little bit more. And then for hot composting, the ideal temperature is between 130 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit. That's why you kind of want to keep it in a dry and shady location. So that is a how to compost. And if all of this seems like a lot of information, and I know it is, I did put together a printable which will give you the 10 rules for composting. So if you don't take away anything else, these are 10 rules that can help you get to a point where your compost is fairly effective. So for example, layering your compost, that is your browns, greens, greens, things like that. Turning your compost, meaning adding oxygen to your compost. Adding water, this can be done by adding food scraps, or you can add additional water if it is too dry. Avoiding meat scraps, that is very bad for your compost. And not only that, it can lead towards vermin, and especially if you keep your compost outside, it can lead to critters getting into your compost that will not help the process. Having more than one bin or pile, for example, you're probably producing a lot more food scraps than you are dead trees, twigs, leaves. Unless it's fall, then you're probably producing a lot if you live where I live. So having more than one pile can help you when it comes to maybe having one process that's a little colder, that's a little bit more nitrogen heavy, and then having a process that is a little bit more ratioed. And then you can kind of switch back and forth between the two when you have some more browns to add to your process. Number 6, avoiding adding trash. I think that's obvious, but try to stick to the yes and no columns when it comes to your compost. Complete the process before use. This is an important one because the process has to fully work itself out to decompose so that you can use it as soil if you are trying to use your compost for gardening. So definitely make sure that you're allowing the process to work before you start using it. If you still have things that aren't broken down, then don't use it yet in your garden unless you are planning to switch over to a trench system where you are burying it very deep and then allowing the natural process to work and planting on top of it. Adding straw and hay, it's very, very important to add your browns. Like I said, your carbon to nitrogen ratio, it's a lot more difficult to add browns because one of the main reason people compost is because they want to get rid of their food scraps. So adding the browns, you need more carbon than nitrogen for the most effective process. Adding eggshells and coffee grounds, these are really, really good greens because they break down very easily because they are already very fragile and already break down very readily. And then avoid pet droppings. I know it's kind of gross, but pet droppings is not going to help out, especially because it introduces different type of vermin to your compost, especially if you keep it outside, just like with meat scraps and trash. So those are the 10 rules for composting. Again, there is a principle, and all of the things that I talked about today are over in the blog post on Archer and Olive, and there are nice tables and things like that there that you can copy and paste and then put it into your bullet journal. And then the 10 rules is in a PDF form that you can add to your bullet journal as well. So I hope that this video was extremely helpful in talking about what composting is. And I hope you're excited to not only help your own wallet, but also to help the earth around you and maybe add a little bit of extra oomph to your garden. So thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Bye, everyone.